Okay, so I need to make this video before I forget why it's still pretty raw. When I talk about this, stomach burning. My, I got poisoned. This is regarding when my brother got raped by tatos. And I talked about this before. My mom just brought this conversation up about that, about the house we used to go to, which used to be over by Webb Chapel. And I think it's called Queen's Chapel they live on. But I say this because Tato and Abraham, we were good friends. They were the same our age. Me and Frankie used to go over there. My dad used to get his truck fixed by this blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy, white guy. His wife. Now, I don't know if she was a transgender or not. I have no idea. I was too young when I went there to even recognize that. So, but I knew that she was always eradicated. Like, it's a minute that I always met that person, there's always some eradication about this person. Maybe once or twice I went over there and it was normal. But that could have been simply because Frankie had then got raped. So you're going to have to talk to Frankie to find out he got raped more than once. Now, drew all the pictures, and I talked about this in several other videos years ago. But I'm not, it's bringing up raw memory of this. I recall my stomach burning, and I want to say I went to the bathroom, and I started throwing up. And I went back to the kitchen, and this lady left. And she was acting totally fucking erratical and nervous and like in paranoia, and was like very vengeful, and was like kind of throwing shit around, kind of like frantic, because she was kind of kooky. But I talk about this because you have to talk to Frankie whether it's happened more than once, because I talked about that when Frankie got raped at that house, he was in the bathroom with that lady's uncle. And this is when I was beating on the fucking door, and I said, what the fuck is, who's in there? Nobody answered, and I left back and wake, and this is the whole situation while my dad was out there working on the mechanic car, and he came out and he said something, he had a gun or some shit. Now, when I was about 13 years old, right after my father's suicide, I was in 5th grade. It was either because I was in basketball. I was in basketball, and I was in late 5th grade. And when I was in basketball, we went to a basketball game in the morning, and I saw Tato and Tato's mother. And my dad was there, and I say my mother was there. She happened to see them as well. And but we saw them, and we didn't say hello or anything like that. And they acted very calm in the huge public seating. They were sitting in the front row at the bottom bleachers. We were sitting kind of in the middle to the top, to the middle, I would say, somewhere. But my mother, they didn't say hello or didn't say anything, or were acting snobby. So that lady knew, and I don't know if she's a transgender or not, and I hate to say this because it is Abraham's and Tato's mother. Now, they could tell you what that story was like. Tato, I talk about this because I had Tato for summer school. And Tato, we know him as Tato. I knew him as that. And they're white guys, but their like father was like, their family was like from like, I don't know, it's like foreign country. But they're like Weddles. So I say this is because I had Tato for summer school when I was on my entry to high school when I was 15 years old. Yeah, I was 15 years old, and I was going into the 9th grade because I failed 1st grade once. And I recall going to summer school. I was 15 years old, and I was at R.L. Turner, and I used to go with Daniel Box. Well, it was probably one of the best summer schools I'd ever been to. I've only been in summer school once as a kid, other than I think maybe in kindergarten once at Ken Elementary. But I was 15 years old, and I used to always hang around Tato. And Tato was kind of like, at that time, he was in boxing, and he was in martial arts and shit. And I used to go to see Tato. I had seen Tato fight a couple of times when he was in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And he told me the story, and he wasn't someone to lie about shit. So when he told you something, you knew it was legitimate. And he was boxing his instructor, and he knocked out his like 22 or 25-year-old boxing instructor in a sparring match, and he was 15 years old, 15 or 16. And I actually saw him in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu match tap out, and he was fighting adults, and he was like 15, 16 years old, and he was fighting full-grown adults. And I remember this is the first time I had ever. This is when UFC, when it all first started, and nobody really knew what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was before he was even famous, before people knew it was effective more than any sport. Because I had already seen, I had come across that one or two videos, I think, was the UFC by that time. I don't remember how old I was. We just happened to come by there, and it was in a martial arts class, and that's where I saw Tato wrestling, and he was like a black belt or some shit. But anyway, I had him for summer school in R.L. Turner, and I've talked about this information, I think, before. Very cool. I mean, he was legitimate, like kind of like an older brother kind of feel when you were around him. And there used to be this other girl that used to be around with big old breasts, and there used to be another guy that used to hang, another Mexican guy that was kind of like bald, but he was like Brazilian kind of, but like a shaved bald head. But everything was real cool and legitimate. When I was around, there was never any problems. It was real cool because people actually looked up to me because I was around these kind of guys and older guys. But anyway, I say this because I think it's important. That's the only way you're going to find out. Because I know that she was acting really crazy around my mother, but it was because of the uncle that had raped. So, there's a big mess of things, and I think it's important because I don't know if, poison is a very common trait that people have been using in order to exterminate and kill. Because you won't be able to detect it, you won't be able to find it, you can measure the time, you can calculate it, and more likely to use it to your advantage, as opposed to people using weapons where you immediately get caught or dissembled because there's just too much that's going on. But I want to say stomach burning, and I started throwing up. But you got to understand, in the state of mind I'm in, I have no reason, because even when I knocked on that door, all I did was smell something, and I didn't even know why the guy was saying he had a gun and he could kill me. He said he had a gun and he was going to use it, but he didn't direct it at anybody. He just said it out loud as he was just kind of walking around the sort of area, and that was it. So I think it's important for me to talk about because, yeah, you take the measures or whatever you want, because I always believed, and it's a very good chance of myoplastic anemia, I do not believe that it was natural. I do not believe aplastic anemia was natural. I believe it was because I came in contact with some sort of chemical. I'm like sure of it. When I was 10 years old, I recall very vividly the aplastic anemia symptoms. The same breathing, the nose, the blood couldn't stop. I noticed the blood was becoming very thin all of a sudden. And I was an athlete. I went from not being able to run so much to all of a sudden having to wait. And I remember I understood blood as a source of the blood, of how it feeds into your body and muscle tissue, and that some people have strong blood, some people have weak blood, or some people think that they do, and so forth. And I always believed I had strong blood, always. I was kind of raised sort of an athlete, like to be thinking of that way. To train and to at a very, very early young age. So I think it's important for me to talk about, because there's no doubt in my mind. I know that was a roller coaster to when it started. I think it was like at a minimal aplastic anemia, because there's like 2 or 3 different stages. I believe there was 3: the aplastic anemia, a mild case, and then a severe. But the reason that it was low was because I don't know what could have been causing it. I don't know the chemistry to that. So that's why I think it was a bit of a roller coaster. But, it always scares me to this day, because that's why I don't think I'll be alive a whole lot longer. Because when you go through that type of deterioration at a young age and you're growing older and older, you don't develop the fully DNA of your full potential because of what that illness did. Had I never been ever sick, ever, I probably would have. I believe I would even have supreme, even much more better genetics. But I think it's important for me to talk about. It's very vividly. I remember as I'm walking, or as I'm last couple of days, stomach burning, and I remember there was stomach burning, and I go to the bathroom and throw up, but there was no one around, and I remember it was just her in the kitchen, and the kitchen was set up exactly. I want to say like the house is almost identically set up to It's almost just like when I was living at Marcus's house at Queen's Chapel. So anyway, I thought I'd say something about that. So if it matters, but you have to talk to Frankie to find out. Draw details and map all that out. Because Frankie could have been poisoned. I wouldn't doubt it, because I want to say my mother went over there once or twice. And if something happened to my mother, and it's for whatever's going on, that my sister was killed because she was poisoned, and it's because they would have poisoned my mother. You do damage to the brain, it travels over time, then you have a stroke like that, and then you can't think, and then it's just, oh, okay, I'm gonna just start pointing the finger, and then I'm gonna start doing this, calculate it even more, and here is my mother sick, and never find out who poisoned her, what artery damages could have done to the toxicity of this, and what the intentions was, and what reasons why. Thought I'd say that.